Hello and welcome everyone to our West Africa alumni webinar. I hope that everyone is doing well and staying safe wherever in the world you are joining us from. Just to do a quick audio check, can you please type yes if you can hear me okay in the chat box, and then I'll just know that everything is working smoothly on your end. See, just waiting. Okay, perfect, great. Okay, so just to quickly introduce myself and the session today, my name is Mischa Ragona, and I'm one of the recruitment and admission managers for the Oxford MBA. I'm joined today by my colleague, Tammy Brophy, who is our Africa Initiative Manager, as well as 4 of our alum who you will be hearing from shortly. I'm really excited to be hosting this session today as one of our online recruitment events targeted at West Africa and the continent as a whole. I find that usually the best source of information you can gather as part of your research process into MBA programs comes from alumni directly, their journey during the MBA, and their career outcomes post-program. So the alum stories will be the primary content for today. So to start the webinar, I'm going to pass it off to Tammy, who will give an overview of Oxford's commitment to the continent and what that means for you as a prospective student. I'll jump back on to give a quick program overview, and then we'll get started with the alumni Q&A. We won't go into detail on application requirements, so please do get in touch with the team after the session if you have specific profile or program questions that were not addressed today. So on that note, I will pass it over to Tammy and we'll go to the next slide.
Great, thank you so much, Mischa, and thank you all for joining us. I hope that you and your families are well. Thank you so much to our alumni who have also joined us today. So on the first slide, I just wanted to chat a little bit more around sort of the Africa initiative at the business school. And I'm sure many of you must see that in times like these, it really does emphasize the need for great management and leadership, both within government and business. You know, more and more, we seeing that business plays in society, especially in addressing some of the most major challenges in the world. So for us here at Oxford Said, we believe that the Oxford MBA plays a significant role in helping students develop as responsible leaders, as well as assist them to navigate some of the rapid changes that exist within Africa's dynamic markets. So as you all know, Africa is becoming an increasingly important region on the global stage. The World Bank has predicted by 2035, the number of Africans of working age is projected to be larger than the combined working populations in all other regions. And along with many opportunities, African countries do also face a particular array of economic, political, and social challenges and environments that create unique business challenges as well. Therefore, there becomes an increased need for leaders who can navigate the challenges and as well as access those opportunities. So to provide a bit more context of the Africa Initiative, back in 2014, a pledge was made by the Dean, Professor Peter Tufano, at the 2014 World Economic Forum on Africa to have at least 10% of our MBA students coming from Africa. So to put that number into perspective, though, most international MBA programs have on average only 2% of their class coming from Africa. Therefore, we were really making a substantial commitment to the continent. As a community, we also believe that by having a significant number of African students, we are able to provide direct insight into a range of very exciting emerging economies in Africa that are very influential, but also educate our non-Africans about the opportunities on the continent. So following that pledge, we became very purposeful in our recruitment to ensure that we could increase accessibility to a broad range of African prospects. That meant we hosted a number of school-led information events in country, online in cases like this, but we also created dedicated scholarships for students from Africa, as we recognize that funding is very often the #1 barrier to being able to consider an international MBA program. So we are very proud to have had more than 10% of the class coming from Africa for the last 4 years. In the current class, we actually have 13% coming from Africa, representing 12 different African nationalities and countries, and 54% of our African students are women. So it really emphasizes that diversity across all areas, especially also in sectors and post-MBA plans. Although we recognize for many of you that gaining some international experience post-MBA is useful, we also wanted to ensure that we are not simply taking away that talent. We didn't want to be seen as an institution that is part of that brain drain and not supporting candidates to return to Africa. So therefore, a major part of our Africa initiative is to include African-focused content, including African electives, case studies, events, and speakers, as well as creating new networks and opportunities during and post-MBA to strengthen your network in Africa. So on this slide, you can see some of those different activities. As I've mentioned, we have some scholarships, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next slide. But right now, you can see activities around our Africa Business Forum, for example, which is our flagship event. It's in its 11th year of running, where we focus on key topics and ideas, where we bring business and African thought leaders to Oxford to be able to engage with the community in Oxford and ensure that our students be able to create some of those opportunities and networks, whether it's through a corporate perspective, supporting individuals that are looking to do their own startups, as well as network with people that were not necessarily considering going and working and living in Africa post their studies. We also have something called the Oxford Africa Business Alliance. So this alliance was what was formerly known as the Africa OBN, which was our student club. We took the student club essentially to a new level. So now it's a joint initiative between both the business school, the students, the wider university, and it goes across programs. So it's a great way, again, for both students and the school to drive some of our activities and initiatives at the business school. We have international electives and dedicated Africa electives in Oxford. So some are focusing on what are the business opportunities in Africa, some are focusing on shared value and entrepreneurship. But what's very significant about this international elective that we run, where about 60 students go out to Africa each year, is that it was the very first international elective that was created by the business school. So really re-emphasizes the school's commitment. I'll let the students talk a little bit more around sort of the alumni networks and connections that they've made, but it has very much evolved from beyond just the recruitment component of increasing accessibility. So on the next slide, I just wanted to end off with showcasing a couple of our scholarships that we have. Now, this is not the full list of scholarships, but these are some of the scholarships that are dedicated and very focused on Africa. A couple to highlight is the Africa Dean Scholarship. So this scholarship is actually personally funded by the Dean and his wife, and it really goes to reaffirm and showcase the school and the Dean's personal commitment to driving this Africa initiative and supporting more African candidates. We have a few other scholarships that are either based on gender, for example, the Oxford Adara Foundation Scholarship, that is for female African candidates with a preference for Nigerian students, as well as a number of other scholarships that might focus on sector or industry. The Jacobs Foundation Scholarship focuses on students working in education and childhood development. We have the Skoll Scholarship, which one of our alumni on the panel will talk a little bit more around social entrepreneurship. So what I would say to you around funding is don't let funding be the barrier to applying. Do your research. All of these scholarships are listed on our website. Go and see what is available to you. There are other scholarships available through the university as well, and not just the business school. Some are full scholarships, some are partial scholarships, some include living expenses. Do your research, but you will not know if you have received a scholarship or if you are going to receive a scholarship until you physically apply and receive an offer on the program. I hope that this slide, though, does reaffirm our commitment to the continent, and we are constantly working on different funding opportunities for our candidates. So about 65% of all our African students do receive a scholarship when coming on the program. So I'll leave it there so that Mischa can just run through the program briefly, and then we'll actually let our alumni talk about some of these topics. So over to you, Mischa. Thank you.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tammy. So I wanted to briefly touch on what your year at Oxford will look like. This is a snapshot of the program at a glance. It does change from year to year, so this is a general idea of what you can expect. The Oxford MBA is a one-year program, a very intense year, running September until the following September. The program is broken into 4 semesters, as you can see, and finishes off with a capstone. In the first semester, the program will cover your core MBA topics as highlighted in red. There are 8 core modules that every student will complete as integrated business fundamentals. These topics include firms and markets, strategy, accounting, finance, and analytics, to name a few. This will be a very intensive period of your program where you will learn to balance your in-classroom teaching and the wide range of resources provided through SBS, Oxford University, the Career Centre, and your colleges. The alumni will talk about some of these aspects in more detail. As we transition into the second semester, students can start to tailor the curriculum by selecting electives to meet their learning objectives. So there are around 40 electives offered. They do change again year to year. So for example, if you were interested in finance, you could take a deep dive into courses such as financial market trading, private equity, and corporate valuation. Or if you were interested in social impact route, you could take courses such as social finance, strategy and innovation, and impact investing. I'll also highlight the entrepreneurial project that every student will work on starting in Hillary term. This entrepreneurship course and project will allow you to develop and complete a business plan and present it to a panel of invited venture capitalists and other practitioners. So in groups of your classmates, you have to develop and put forward a well-managed plan, including financials, patents, market intelligence, and investment needs. If you already run a business or have an idea, this is a great chance to develop a new product or business model in a safe environment. So moving to the summer term, although it is a one-year program, we still provide opportunities for working internships for credit, which is critical for those candidates who are looking to transition country, industry, or function. And you have 2 opportunities to take advantage of the internship component. Lastly, I'll just mention the co-curriculars that are pictured on the bottom of this slide. They run the full duration of the program. These co-curriculars are non-credit programming that allow you to take a deep dive into topics through workshops, tutorials, expert speakers, and industry events. So these include Finance Lab, Impact Lab, and the Consulting Development Program. So for an example, if you are interested in transitioning, say, from engineering to consulting, the Consulting Development Program is based around the hiring process of global consulting recruiters. You'll be coached through practical workshops, recruiter-led case events, and be given access to online resources and tools. So these are fantastic opportunities for those candidates with specific career goals in mind. So the next slide will give you an idea of what the class profile looks like and who you can expect to be your classmates while on the MBA. As you see, we have referenced ranges and not averages. As you assess your application, please don't look at the suitability based on averages you may see listed. Our admissions team is more interested on what the strength of your profile is. This includes your past experience and your career goals going forward. It's a very holistic application at Oxford, and each student will have their own individual story. So lastly, to note, the class is extremely diverse with over 64 nationalities represented to enhance your day-to-day learning experience and your global network going forward. Again, our recruitment team will be more than happy to go over your profile and suitability for the program, so do get in touch as part of your MBA exploration. So on that note, I will transfer it over to the alumni. I'd like to welcome Charlotte, Onome, Patrick, and Bio, and ask if they could please join us by turning on their webcams at this time. So we'll see if this goes smoothly. Perfect. Welcome, Bio, Onome, Patrick, and Charlotte. Great. Excellent to see you. Okay, perfect. So I guess as a place to start, I'm going to ask that each of you give a brief introduction to yourselves, where you're based now, and what you're doing. And so Charlotte, if you could please kick us off. and you'll just have to unmute.
I didn't realize I was muted. Apologies. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So my name is Charlotte Tim. I graduated Said in 2015. I was part of the 2014 to 2015 program. And I currently work as part of the Gender and Economic Inclusion team at the International Finance Corporation, where I focus on digital technology.
Okay, perfect. Bio, do you want to go next? I think you're just muted as well on your end.
Okay, so
there we go. Yes, all perfect.
Right, cool. Yeah, so my name is Bayo Wolabi. I was part of the 2017-2018 class. I currently work for the Boston Consulting Group as a consultant. There I'm affiliated to the energy and social impact practices, and I mostly work on topics around climate change, around emissions reduction strategies.
Perfect, thank you very much. Anome, could you go next, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Onome Ofoman. I was in the class that just graduated, so 2018-19. I'm currently based in Lagos, where I work as a software engineering lead at Microsoft. And before the MBA, I was in New York working for a few years as a software engineer at Google.
Perfect, thank you. And Patrick, that leaves you.
Great, hi, Patrick Beatty. I am the co-founder of a health tech startup based in Ghana called Redbird. See, that side. And I was a classmate of Charlotte's, 2014 to 15, and a School Scholar.
Okay, perfect. I'll ask you about the School Scholar in your question coming up. So thanks for that intro. Okay, so Charlotte, just for our first question here, you made a career pivot from marketing into a finance role. So is that the path you knew you wanted to take? And how did the program's resources help you make that transition?
So first of all, I should clarify that I work for what is essentially a development investment bank, being IFC, but I do not work necessarily in a finance role. I work with investment teams that are looking at different companies in the tech sector and look at how they can be a lot more inclusive in their approaches. And in that way, we provide advisory services. So of course, that also involves having a deeper understanding of what goes into considerations for investment. For myself, as Mischa mentioned, I started out my career working in the fashion industry in Canada. And I think what prompted me to want to make that move was two key things. For one thing, I really did want to move back to the region and do more in the Africa region and in Ghana specifically. But I also had the urge to do something more meaningful. And I say that and I smile because at the time, I had no clue what that meant. So my transition to Said really involved first really understanding what that meant for me, because it means different things for different people. And I found myself working with tech entrepreneurs in Ghana in business development roles, helping them navigate the business development landscape in Ghana. And had applied to Said, to be quite honest, at the time, it was a backup plan, believe it or not. I applied as a backup plan as I was doing this transition, and thankfully got into the program. And I think what I was really looking for as part of the program as well was recognizing that even though my undergraduate degree was in economics, I really had a very high level and a bit more theoretical understanding of the business world, even though I had worked with one of the largest retail companies in North America at the time. So I really wanted to get a better understanding of finance, working with entrepreneurs. I also wanted to gain a better understanding of what really went into making a business investment ready, and what are the considerations that you need to take in order to do that and achieve that for businesses in the Africa region specifically. So in my current work, I find that some of the things that I knew going into the MBA keep coming up, such as what it really is a mature company in the Africa region when you have businesses that are 10 years old but still very rudimentary in their practices. So in going for the MBA, I really wanted a deeper understanding of that, recognizing that I did want to come back to the region and I did want to work with entrepreneurs and small businesses in particular. And during the course of the program, I think I did really get that. You saw the schematic that Mischa shared earlier, which showed the different terms and the different electives and core subjects that we take. And in addition to things like finance lab, where you really get to hone in on specific areas that you want to improve on or specific skills. What I particularly enjoyed were courses like entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial finance. I think that spoke specifically to some of the elements of my work currently, and I still every once in a while refer back to them as well. So yeah, I'd say definitely in making that transition, or for anyone making any kind of transition and looking at an MBA to facilitate that, I think it's important to, within the context of the 1 year that you have at Oxford, be a bit strategic in going in. And I say that and smile again because I told myself this and that was not the approach that I took. But looking back, I think there's a lot of opportunity available, a lot of courses, as you've been shown, and just taking the time. I'm hesitant to say look at it now because I think a lot of it changes once you actually get into the program and are actually in the program, but constantly revisiting what the program offers in line with your goals as well as they may change during the course of the program.
Fabulous, thanks for that. And yes, we do always say, it's good to have a plan and the goals outlined, but to revisit that and make the changes when necessary based on sort of the learning experience in your journey. So thank you for sharing. Anome, I'll just ask you the next question here. So you were educated in the US, and as you mentioned, you spent some time working there. You left a position in New York before you did joined the Oxford MBA. So can you tell us about why you chose a UK program over a US program and how the school's focus on Africa helped you transition back into working in Africa, which was your ultimate goal?
Right. So I did go to university in the US in California, and before that I was in Nigeria. I was born there, brought up there, and so the rest of my family was here. And so for me, going to the US, I always knew I wanted to come back home to be closer to family and to work within the country. And so that had always been in my mind. And after a few years working as a software engineer, I learned a lot working with the people that I worked with and working on the kinds of projects that I got the opportunity to work on. But looking in the future, it felt to me that I had reached sort of the peak for programming, and I wanted to do something a bit more high level. And so whether that's running my own company or managing other software engineers. So that felt to me like a good time to revisit and think about going back home. And in looking at the different ways, so I would tell you guys I'm very risk averse. And so I didn't just want to just go to Lagos and show up there and be like, okay, where are the jobs? I wanted a plan. And the way I was thinking about it was an MBA would give me at least a year to think things through, see if I was really ready and ready for what, so give me an opportunity to meet people that would maybe spark interesting thoughts and who I could collaborate with and learn from. So I chose a school outside the US because I felt like I had a great network already in the US, and I've always loved to travel, so it would be a chance to experience a new culture, a new set of people, a different network. So that was the number one reason, just a different environment from the US. The second thing is because I knew I wanted to move back home, logistically speaking, I think the UK is better placed for me to interact with people in Nigeria or in the continent of Africa in general, just in terms of traveling, in terms of the time zone. But then also there was a focus of the school on Africa. And what that made me realize was that because I knew that at least 10% of my class would be coming from the continent, like this would be a great way to experientially learn from them, how are things going in their country, what are the different things they're thinking about doing. So knowing that I would be surrounded by people who either are from Africa, from Nigeria specifically, or are thinking about working back there was a big draw as well. And I'd say the third thing was really a focus of the school. So I talked already about the Africa focus, but then another interesting thing to me was the social impact focus. And this is because I've always worked in the corporate world. I still am working in the corporate world, but I'm very passionate about education. My mom is a teacher, and I've always thought about myself going into teaching eventually, and maybe even doing it on the Ministry of Education level. So I was thinking about how to transition into that as a possible thing to do sometime later in the line. And so having a school where I knew there would be people also from that background, whether it's people who have worked in nonprofits, people who've worked in impact investing, impact consulting, just knowing that I'll be surrounded by people who are thinking in that way and who again I could learn from was also a big draw. So those were the three things: the Africa focus, social impact focus, and just a chance to explore a different culture. And yeah, so I think in terms of how the MBA helped my transition back home to Nigeria, it helped immensely. I still talk to people that I met from school. I mean, one of my closest friends, Sheye, he knows, I would say, almost everybody in Nigeria. And so if I'm trying to do anything here, I just call him and he's like, yeah, I know someone who works there. So the network has been more than fantastic. I mean, it's made the transition a lot easier. And hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about this some more as well. But a lot of the classes that I took have helped me in the role that I'm now in. So I currently work as a software engineering lead for a global company, a global technology company that decided to come into Lagos and also in Nairobi last year. And so I've had to navigate as part of my transition back home, not just navigating, living in a new city, but navigating, trying to develop an engineering team in a remote location when, most of the engineers are based in Seattle. So a lot of the classes I took on negotiation, on strategy, on prioritization have come in very, very, very handy. Things get political really fast in a way that I never realized as a software engineer, like when you're on the managerial side. So it's definitely helped to have those in my arsenal that, things I could call on, specifically negotiations has been very, very helpful. Yeah, so I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, perfect. And I will ask you some more sort of follow-up questions about that as well, but thanks for sharing that. So for Patrick, as a non-African working in Africa, can you please talk us through your decision and that experience for you so far as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm American. I was born and raised in Alaska. Have spent a lot of my career working related to the continent, but was not based out here. Before I went to Oxford, I was the founding scientist at a nonprofit medical diagnostics company out of Boston, and so I'd grown that company for a bit. And I think my decision to go to Oxford, though, was very similar to a lot of what I'm hearing on the panel, which was I realized I was looking for a change. I actually had been spending some time on the continent and was getting very excited by the startup scene that I saw, and that prompted me to have this new idea of what would become Redbird get into my head, and I realized I wanted to pursue that. And I thought an MBA was a good transition into that ability to form connections and as well as take some time to look at markets and decide where it made the most sense to go. And so when I was looking at MBAs, one of the things that was really important to me was that I would have connections, I would build these relationships with the region I wanted to work in. And when I looked at US schools, I just didn't see that same proximity, not just geographic, but relationship-wise to Africa. And when I looked at Oxford, I saw that. And in addition to that, it was the concept that the program is a very, in some ways, traditional program of you get everything you would get at an MBA school from the learnings wise, but you aren't the weird person if you are interested in social enterprise and things like that, right? Like I think it was mentioned, a lot of my classmates, even if they weren't working directly in that field, it was something that they were interested in learning more about or viewed as very valid. And so those were the main reasons that Oxford was so attractive to me, and it's really helped out in a lot of ways. I was able to use a lot of the coursework to develop my idea further. So the entrepreneurship project, of course, but some other programs that went on through the year and various assignments that we had to do for class, I was able to direct those towards Redbird, or what Redbird was at that time. And it helped me to narrow down the markets and get very excited about Ghana. When I moved to Ghana, I first helped set up a medical supply company here for a Tanzanian company that I met or had a relationship with from our summer SCP, our summer project during that time, consulting project. And that was huge in giving me the time to understand the market better and eventually meet my one of my co-founders, Andrew Kwao, who's here. And so, you know, everything that happened at Oxford really helped set me up for success in the market, and continues to. It's been great to have those connections with friends who have a background in a lot of different areas that I don't have expertise in. I love knowing that I made a lot of great friends during the program who are global, have a global mindset, and if I need support in any area such as accounting, I know there's someone who that's their thing, and I can call on them and they're happy to help me out and talk me through whatever problem I'm having and be there. And so those were all the reasons I chose Oxford and why I think it's helped a lot in setting up a company here in Ghana.
Great, fabulous. And we often do talk about sort of the diversity of thought on the program and that being sort of a key value that you get by being a student and with the network going forward. So I'm glad that resonated for you. Okay, so for bio, you are seen as a triple jumper, so career, country, and function. And now you're working in the UK in consulting. So how is the Oxford MBA useful in making that transition? Did you know you wanted to work in the UK beforehand? And if so, what was your preparation before and during the MBA?
Yep, I wasn't planning to do a triple jump for sure. I still remember very clearly when the dean asked us on the first day and said, you know, how many people want to do what? You know, if you're doing a single switch, sit down, 2, sit down. I sat down at 2. I knew I was going to switch into consulting. I thought it was going to be back in Lagos. It's in London now. So, okay, Oxford was quite instrumental to, I suppose, making a plan that I had but wasn't very serious about, a little bit more concrete. So for context, most of my career was with Schlumberger, which is a fairly international company, but I had a unique career in the sense that I worked almost exclusively in Africa throughout the almost 7 years I was there, and a large part of that was in Ghana as well. So there was the question at the back of my mind going into the MBA if I wanted to do something else outside of Africa for a while before going back home. So it was an option that was there, but wasn't quite concrete. However, my wife's got family in London, and so when we started to live in Oxford, she was quite keen to wait. So I was like, okay, time to take this a bit more seriously. And so the MBA helped in 3 ways, if I put it that way. London is a very popular office for consulting. Everyone wants London, New York, Singapore, something like that, right? So there's usually a need to justify why you need to be in London rather than another office. And in the case of BCG, being in school at Oxford Said was enough of a justification for you to prove that you want to be there. Some other firms require a bit of a stronger link to the UK. Your partner is from there, your partner lives there, and stuff like that. So that's one, and that's probably the weakest link actually. The consultant development program, which was mentioned previously, was very, very useful. You do get access to a lot of material that you can use. You get access to live practice with consultants. You get live access to the firms that are recruiting, and so all of that helped me in exploring what I was really trying to get myself into, but also getting access to real material that I could use to get myself prepared. And I think the final point, which is probably the strongest one, is just your classmates, right? A lot of them, and I think this is something that has come up a bunch of times, a lot of them were doing what you want to do now. And so being able to have access to people who have walked the walk that you're planning to walk, and just being able to tap the experience and practice with them, and rely on them to do things like give your CV another look, and help you in the translation of your skills into a form that really presented you in the best light for the roles that you were targeting. That was quite invaluable, and it continues to be relevant till date. The final point, and I suppose we will get into that a bit later, is on the electives. I chose the electives that I felt were going to be most supportive for the role that I was trying to get into, and so we can talk more about what those were and how those helped. But it goes beyond just coursework. I think outside of the core material, the electives really give you an opportunity to explore your interests and to build up knowledge in an area where you may not necessarily have it.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing. Okay, so Charlotte, you were part of the Africa OBN, which Tammy has mentioned, and now the Africa Alliance. Can you tell us about your involvement and how the network works for students? How are you involved within the program as well as the wider university?
Thanks, Mischa. So just to get a bit of background, so any Oxford Business Network that's set up is really, the impact is really what the students make it. So in addition to the Africa OBN, we also had, I think it was the Arts Network, PEVC, OBN, so tons of OBNs doing tons of events. But for the Africa OBN in particular, our core mandate, essentially the only thing we set out to do was to roll out this huge conference, which at the time was a collaboration between the business school and the Africa OBN and the Africa Society of the broader Oxford University. So it was one conference that was held as a collaborative effort between the two. So that brought almost 1,000 people to Oxford the year that I ran it, in collaboration with Yasmin Kumi, who was also an MBA student the following year. I think that in itself was such a big feat at the time, when you look at it in the context of all the other work that was going on. And this was also held in Hillary term, which if you look at the schematic that Mischa shared earlier, is where you're doing some core courses, a bunch of electives. So typically the busiest time as well for a lot of MBA students. But of course, in putting together this conference that brought together, that brought a president, a lot of dignitaries, a lot of work, a lot of planning, and a lot of learning for myself as well, in addition to the MBA. So the conference was really our core output, if you can call it that, during my time. But in addition, we tried to also, as much as possible, do events where we highlighted specific themes that were relevant to the region. Also looking at supporting students who wanted to go to Africa at the time. Patrick, you'll need to remind me what it was called. There was a specific program that brought a couple of MBAs to, I think it was Kenya.
Oh, the student treks.
Yeah,
Yes,
maybe.
Student treks. Yeah.
East Africa trek.
It's been it's been 4 to 5 years, but yeah, so we're quite involved in that as well. And a couple of us, I didn't go for those trips, but a couple of members of the Africa OPN did. And as Patrick alluded to, that's also an opportunity to actually introduce people who are thinking of working in the regions to, within the admittedly short time frame of a week, really introduce them to the landscape in the region as well. Since we've left Oxford, I think there have been a range of other initiatives that I think Tammy can go into in terms of the OBN's work in putting together the now separate Africa Business Forum. But of course, the broader Africa, the Oxford Africa Society also puts together an annual conference as well, which as an MBA student, I think is phenomenal to tap into that and to tap into the Africa network at Oxford, which is phenomenal as well. So I can go into a bit more detail on that, but I think the question was specifically on the business network.
Okay, that's perfect. We'll come back for some more detail if we have time, but I'm just aware that I want to get sort of enough of the topics sort of spread out across. So Patrick, I'll ask you, you were a school scholar, as you mentioned, and now you've got your career based on the business that you've built. So what was the support provided as being a school scholar, and how did this center help you build your career, as well as what was the scholarship application and process like?
Sure. I mean, the support has been incredible, and I'm very fortunate to have received it. It's been incredibly helpful in enabling me to work on things, healthcare, something that makes me passionate that otherwise I might not have been able to with the financial commitments and other commitments that come with an MBA. And the support from the school scholarship is twofold. One is the financial support. It covers the entire cost of being at Oxford. And the latter is the ongoing support. And that's what I think is fantastic about the School Center, because it's not just a scholarship. The center is there for current students and alumni, no matter whether you're a school scholar or not. And I've definitely have leveraged the center for connections that were helpful in setting up the business. I participated in the School Venture Awards, which is a program they just did this year's version of, which gives grants to early stage social enterprises. And they've been very helpful in even things like PR, just always wanting to support people who are working on interesting social impact or entrepreneurship style things. And that support is fantastic, and that's, you know, a huge part of the value. I can go into what the application is like, but I believe it's changed a lot since I was there. But I think recognizing that I am not on the application committee by any stretch and have no bearing on it, my advice for people applying for a school scholarship is what's really important to the school center is trying to identify people who have a demonstrated passion in a specific area. And when I say demonstrated, as in have spent already typically a couple of years showing that this is something that they're dedicating their career to. Now, it doesn't have to be a specific business, but it's showing it does need to typically be a specific area, and it needs to be obvious that this is something that you want to do, and you're trying to find out any way you can do this post-career work in this space. And so that is, if you're considering a Skoll scholarship, I think if you are still in the resume building stage, maybe you're not looking to apply immediately this year, that's something to keep in mind is, am I creating that story? Because that is the one thing I'd say that's been consistent across all of the years that I've seen them work the application. It's looking for that story within people.
Okay, fabulous. Thanks very much. Anome, I'll just ask you about some sort of program content. So were there some areas that you found most useful or interesting based on your background and what your career goals were going forward? And how did sort of the 12-month journey and resources support that?
Absolutely. So I'll try and talk about two specific ones. So for me, the one I always go back to when I'm asked this question is the Impact Lab. So aside from the regular courses that we have, I think Mischa mentioned earlier, we have things like the Impact Lab, the Finance Lab, there's an Asset Management Masterclass as well, but these are extra courses that you can take in a cohort of people who are interested. So in my year, there were about 25 people in the Impact Lab, and these are essentially weekly sessions where you go through some theory on social impact with this group. And usually there'll be someone from that industry who will be there to talk to you about it. So if we're talking about, for example, impact investing, there'll be someone from impact investing to speak to you. And then you also get a chance for people within that cohort to share their own experience and also co-lead these sessions if they have enough background. So for me, that group was extremely helpful because it helped me see what the various facets of impact are, how you could still do social impact even if you're not an entrepreneur, even within a big company. You could have internal social impact within different big companies. So opening my eyes to what was possible beyond, just a regular nonprofit was extremely helpful. And then always, the learning from other people, seeing what they've done. I think this has come up a lot in this conversation, but in the case of social impact, it's a bit hard if you've always, had this one focus. In my case, which was software engineering, it's a bit hard to think how I would go from there to teaching, for example. And so having people to talk about it with, to brainstorm with, was also good. And then related to that is it's also a space where you can challenge yourself, where you can reflect. And so I mentioned this is a small cohort of people who, you're all pushing for the same thing. You all have this one interest. So having a safe space like that where you can reflect on the things that you've done and then chart a path forward to what you'd want to do in the future was really great for me, because that was one of the things I wanted to get out of the program, a space to just reflect on my prior skills and experiences and how I can leverage that for the future. So that space was provided by this Impact Lab. And I would encourage anyone who is remotely interested to just apply and be in that space and see what it would do for you. The second thing, in terms of the classes, I had a lot of fun with the negotiations class, because for me, what I tried to focus on in this program was, okay, there are things I know I'm good at and I've had a lot of experience in, and then there are things I know I'm not so strong at. So negotiations was one of that for me. And the class was very, very interesting because it's very experiential. Each class, you are reading a case, and then in the case, they're usually different. They're different characters. So everyone in the class gets to play a character and is paired up with some other character, and then they do a head-to-head negotiation. And then in some cases, like one of those pairs gets to do that negotiation in front of the rest of the class, and then the class gets to critique them. So you're learning the theory in the same class that you are then practicing the negotiation. And then you get to get instant feedback, not just from the professors, but from your other classmates who are CEOs, have been in positions where they had to do similar negotiations themselves. And so this mix of theory and practice, I don't really think I got from any other class, but negotiations. And so for me, that was my favorite. Yeah. Mischa, I think I missed the last part of your question.
No, I think that covers it. Good to have sort of the co-curricular that you mentioned, and then as well as a class that was a highlight. So that's great. And I see obviously Patrick might have enjoyed the negotiations class as well with a thumbs up. So glad that was a highlight.
That was a fun class for sure.
Okay, so for bio, you did mention some electives that you took that stood out for you. So just to follow up on that, sort of any key areas of the program that you found most useful, or do you want to highlight some of the electives that you took that really resonated with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't take the negotiations one. It was overbooked, so I was like, fine. If you guys really want to do it, I'm going to skip. But I did want to. I wanted to learn more about social impact, and no surprise, I am affiliated to the social impact practice in BCG already. And so I really took the time to jump into that. So I think there was a course, Tech for Impact, that was being offered the first time in the year I was in. I took that, Rethinking Business. I think GoTo in our year was very much social impact oriented as well. So those were, a bucket of things that I wanted to explore and had zero experience in that I did. But then there were also other things that I did more out of interest and because I felt they were going to extend me in ways that were going to be positive for my consulting career. So I work with the energy practice. I took the energy markets elective in the year I was there. It's a great course. The professor is someone that I collaborate with right now, even from within BCG as part of our collaboration with Oxford. So that was a great link for me. Mega project management, identification and finances, marketing analytics. Essentially, I was an engineer switching into a business role. And so there were like all of this interesting pockets that were not covered by the core courses. And that's what I spent all my electives doing. And so there's no real theme to them if you look at them as individually, but they were really just ways for me to close where I saw gaps in my skill set.
Perfect, thank you. And I think the format of the program that has the core and then the ability to tailor it allows you to do exactly that and pick and choose the courses that you feel like you have areas you need to develop on or want to work on or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we have time for our last question for each person. So I'm going to try to get through them here. So for Charlotte, often we talk about the MBA program being so much more at Oxford. So all the things that the city has to offer and the colleges. You talked a little bit about sort of the Africa Alliance, but for you outside of the classroom in terms of activities or your college experience, can you share a little bit more about what that was like and what your favorite part was?
Definitely. I think this is where I talked about being a bit strategic with the little time that you have in the MBA. I knew going in that I wanted a college that would also give me a sense of the Oxford experience outside of the business school. A lot of MBAs go for a college that is literally right next door. So the joke was that you roll out of bed and you can roll into class within 2 minutes. I was actually in Hartford College, which was a bit further, but had a really small community of different graduate students from different disciplines across the broader Oxford University. So that was a really good experience whenever they had what they call MCR, MCR graduate nights, MCR dinners, a good opportunity to meet and interact with different people from outside the MBA circle, which is, MBAs are great, but it's always refreshing to meet people who are doing different things. And of course, doing activities like the Africa Conference, which was at the time a collaborative effort, was a really good way of meeting different people from the different disciplines across the university, but also very much interested in the continent as well. So that was a phenomenal experience. Within the context of the MBA program, at the time, there were also programs offered by the school center. So Patrick and I were also part of a program called Leading for Impact, which was run by the school center. So I secretly call it School Scholar Light. So you get to Really a program that brings together, again, students from across the university, so not just MBA students, where you get to delve into your interest in the social impact space, really building yourself up as a leader as well, different exercises. We went on a retreat as part of this as well. And up until today, we still have, I still have sessions which are called active learning sessions with one of the people who was on the program that wasn't part of the MBA at all. And the idea is that you have a problem, you have 5 minutes or so to speak about that problem, and the entire time the other person is just listening to you. And when you're finished, they ask clarifying questions that are meant to lead you. But the whole idea is that it helps you to eventually come up with your own solutions. And I found that to be extremely useful even today. Aside from that, I was also part of an alliance called the Harambee Alliance, which did not start outside of, started outside of Oxford, I should say, rather. So that's a global network of African students or students in universities outside of Africa that are all interested in doing projects on the continent as well. So that allowed me to tap into a network of similarly minded people that weren't necessarily in Oxford, but also had the same goals and the same interests in social entrepreneurship and channeling that back to the continent as well. So I think ultimately it all depends on, within the limited amount of time that you would have in such an MBA program, linking it back to ultimately what does success look like after this. And for me, it looked like having a broader network as I returned back to the continent in particular. So, and also building up my own leadership skills as well.
Perfect.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, for bio, I will ask you this last question here. So a number of people have partners or spouses that come into the MBA program, and in fact, on average, more than 30% of the course is married. So what support and activities is provided for spouses, families, or partners during the MBA?
Yeah, so I think for Oxford's great for everyone. It's a great place to live. So you can take that off your worry list. It's a little bit expensive, and if you're coming with a partner, you need to budget for that. If you're coming with a kid and a partner, you need to budget for that as well. So I'd say you have a little bit of extra work to do there, but there's resources available from the school. I found that there was, early on in the program, there was a lot of support from the MBA, like family specific programs, especially in the first term as you're trying to find your space. As it goes on, that tapers up a little bit, but then most people have found their crew, and most of the partners kind of have their own thing going anyway. If you're coming with kids, I think one I need to be really specific about, if you've got really young childcare can be difficult to find in Oxford, so you need to start early, use the school because they have some provision, but also just reach out to providers directly. But if your kids are 3, slightly older, you should be fine to find childcare relatively easily. So for me, it's if I give a takeaway on that, there will be trade-offs that you need to make in terms of how much time you can spend with your classmates. There's always 1,001 things to do, versus how much time you can spend with your family. There's trade-offs around finances and childcare that you need to be mindful of. But there's a lot of resources, and what I found was really helpful for me was just to have started early, reaching out to providers, reaching out to the school and saying, I'm going to need this, I'm going to need that, and try to have as many things as you can lined up before you arrive in Oxford. But it will be a great experience. My family loves it. My daughter wants to go back all the time, so nothing bad to say on that.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Onome, I will ask if you could provide a piece of advice to prospects as they look into MBA programs and their application. What would that be?
Oof, that's a tough one. I mean, I think a great place to start is to know why you're applying. It's oftentimes the MBA is a great program if you don't know what to do next or if you know what to do next. So either way, you'll be fine, but just have some idea of the reason for applying. For me, it was a chance to reflect and to just think more long term about my career, and a chance to do that through people who have been where I want to be. And then what I would also say is when you are finally in the program, be open to things that you haven't considered before. So I knew coming in that I wanted to focus a bit more on social impact. But the first term, I went to a few of the consulting information sessions. I talked to a lot of my friends in the program who had done investment banking. So there are people from every field you can think of. And so don't discount any field because you already see a path in your mind. Just be a bit more open, and you know, you might surprise yourself. You might end up doing something you never thought you would do because you were open to listening to what someone has to say about it. And maybe the last thing, I'll just share a story about how I got my current job. So I got it through a connection from someone who currently works at Microsoft. And when I came to the MBA, my goal was to come back home to Lagos, to either start something of my own or to work at a startup. And I never thought I would come back and work at a big company. But like knowing what I wanted, which was to be at home, and knowing the kind of impact I wanted to make, which was a combination of doing deep technical work in Nigeria, but also being able to increase the skill level of software engineers in Nigeria. Saying no to an offer from a big company who wanted to do exactly that in Lagos didn't really make sense. So even though I came in wanting to do my own thing, the best path for me, as I went through the MBA and as I discovered what was available was to accept this offer. And honestly, I couldn't have thought of a better way to come back home. And I'm really, really happy with the work that I'm doing. And I'm really excited about how much the MBA has helped me to excel at the job I have now. So in summary, be open, but yes, listen to everyone.
Okay, fabulous. That's great. And just to end off here, because it's a really great story and relevant to what's going on, I just wanted to hear from Patrick about your own company, Redbird, with the health app, and you've responded to COVID. So what's your company doing right now? Tell us a little bit about the daily check-in app and the symptom tracker, and how you've been able to sort of leverage that in the uncertain circumstance that we're faced with.
Sure. Thanks for the chance to talk about it. Yeah, so it's been a crazy couple of months, I think, for everyone. Understatement of the panel here. But at Redbird, what we've always been doing since we started is helping pharmacies offer convenient rapid diagnostic tests for patients. So you don't have to go into a hospital. You can pop into a pharmacy if you need to check your cholesterol or your blood sugar or whether you have malaria or typhoid. And so when COVID-19 hit, obviously it's hit pretty close to what we are passionate about, which is making sure people can conveniently be safe and take care of their health. And so one of the things we did was a great experience of working with a couple local devs, Ghanaian guys that we've worked with in the past who aren't part of Redbird, but we know through, if I trace it all the way back, it's probably through Lottie actually that I know Gerald, or sorry, Charlotte, that I know Gerald. But we looked at it and had these developers that were working on other companies, other jobs at the moment, but we saw the chance to take what we already had at Redbird, which was a personal health record system for individual patients, and transform it into something that could help with COVID-19 response. And so what we did was, within a week of a lot of hard work on their end, we were able to create a daily check-in app to where anyone could go in and check in and just report whether they were having any symptoms or any risk factors associated with COVID-19, whether they have a cough, a fever, or even just whether they had traveled outside of the country recently. And the concept there is then to take that data and then use that to better inform response in a way that can help everyone out by keeping caseloads down. And excited to say that we've been able to do that with a cancer clinic here in Ghana called Sweden Ghana Medical Center, where they're using that app to ensure their staff and their patients' safety. So people who really they can't delay their treatments for cancer. They need to be going into a facility. They need to know that that facility can continue to operate and that they'll be safe when they're there. And at the same time, that facility needs to know that they're putting their staff in the safest place possible, that they're not exposing them to risk unnecessarily. So they've been able to use this, having all of their staff and soon their patients checking in by an app every day. They're able to then see, okay, who's high risk? Is there anyone that I need to prioritize for a test? Or maybe they don't come into work for a couple days. Let's get them tested before we bring them in and risk exposure to other people. And it's been really it's been a stressful couple of months. It's been crazy, but it's also been exciting in a lot of ways for us. And I think it is times like this when things suddenly are thrown for a loop and oftentimes are very overwhelming that I realized some of the benefit of why I did the MBA. And it wasn't necessarily because of what you learn via the classes, so much as the chance to, through those classes, reflect on how others have faced challenges. And that's what I find kind of sticks in the back of your head. And I might not think about it every day, but then when you get it thrown into a situation like this, you realize the benefit of having had those discussions and that time to reflect with classmates of a whole bunch of different experience and background, that you're now making decisions based on that collective knowledge that you're exposed to. And I've been thinking about that more and more as we've been trying to navigate something we definitely weren't expecting, but are doing what we can to address.
Great, thank you so much. It's great to see the impact that you're having in the current state. So on that note, I'm cautious of the time here, so we're a little bit over. I want to thank you all very much for sharing your insights. To prospective students, there's also, I'm noticing on the call, there's some admitted students, some accepted students, so soon to be future Oxford alum as well. So thanks very much for sharing your insights and your experiences with us. Our email is listed on the slide for anyone who has questions, again, about the profile or program or something more in depth that we would be able to answer for you. So please do reach out. And I hope that everyone has a great evening, and thank you for tuning in today. So on that note, we will say goodbye and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.